Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another video to do with the SuperSocket 7 platform. Today we're looking at graphics cards from ATI. In total we've got 5 graphics cards. On the left hand side we have got 2 Rage cards, the Rage 128 and then the Rage 128 Pro, which is basically a faster version with a few upgrades. And then we have the first Radeon. Initially it was called Rage 6 internally, and there's a reference on one of the chips, but they ended up selling it under the Radeon brand. And there's the Radeon DDR. However, I've got the Radeon SDR, which has a slightly slower memory. I always thought I had the DDR, but when I actually started using it, I realized I've only got the SDR version, so just keep that in mind. The DDR version might be a little bit faster. And the last 2 cards are also 2 Radeons, the Radeon 8500 and the Radeon 9200. I had some issues with the 8500. Now the version I'm using is the all-in-wonder, which has a TV tuner and audio video inputs and outputs, and I got a message to do with not enough resources being available. So unfortunately I could not get this card going, and therefore I don't have any benchmarks. A real shame, because it would have been a nice in-between card. The final card is the Radeon 9200. Now that's a very modern card, quite powerful, and we will see if this card makes sense in the SuperSocket 7 platform or not. So let's get straight into GLQuake. We've got a lot less cards now that we know which cards are better. I just included those. So we've got the TNT2 Pro, then we've got the Quadro 2 Pro doing really well. We've got the Voodoo 3 and the Voodoo 5 a little bit slower. Here we've got the Rage 128, so quite a bit slower. And here the Rage 128 Pro. Here's the original Radeon, the Radeon SDR, and then we've got the Radeon 9200. So we can see that they're all kind of bunched up here in the low resolution, and whereas the other cards can go a little bit further. So this is really an indicator for a processor limitation or optimization, that the K6 processor is not being used fully with the ATI drivers compared to the NVIDIA and AMD. Once you crank up the resolutions, you can see they all lose pretty much similar performance. Some of the faster cards lose a little bit less. Okay, 32-bit colors. We've got the TNT2 Pro, the Quadro 2 Pro, the Voodoo 5 is here, Rage 128, Rage 128 Pro, so getting a little bit closer to the TNT2 in 32-bit colors, which is nice to see. This is the Radeon, so once again we've got that limitation at low resolutions, but as soon as the resolution gets higher, the Rage 6 is actually able to go ahead of the TNT2 Pro. And here we've got the Radeon 9200, starts off a little bit slower, but solid as a rock across all the resolutions. Quake 2 in 16-bit, TNT2 Pro. Then the Quadro 2 Pro, quite a boost, and that's because of the TNL engine support in OpenGL. We've got the Voodoo 3 and the Voodoo 5. They don't have TNL, so they kind of top out here. Rage 128, Rage 128 Pro, and then we've got the Rage 6. So they're all stuck down here. So that clearly shows once again that the drivers are not that optimized for the K6, because I know if you put these cards in a Pentium 3, they will perform much faster. And finally the Radeon 9200 gains a little bit of a speed, but not much to get close to the other cards. Quake 2 in 32-bit, TNT2, the Quadro 2 Pro, the Voodoo 5, and here we've got the Rage 128 and Rage 128 Pro. And finally the Rage 6 and the Radeon 9200. So similar conclusion applies. The cards all perform very well, but just a little bit behind the competition because the drivers are not that well optimized for the K6. incoming in 16-bit. Now that's a direct 3D game. We've got the TNT 2 Pro. The Quadro 2 Pro doesn't get any points because it renders the image with faults. We've got the Voodoo 3 and the Voodoo 5, so they're all bunched together. We've got the Rage 128 down there, and then the Rage 128 Pro, so very slow in this game in 16 bits. We've got the Rage 6 here, so this card does a lot better, is getting close to the other cards, and the Radeon 9200 loses a bit of performance. Let's have a look at 32-bit, the TNT 2 Pro. The Quadro 2 Pro again gets no points because it renders the image incorrectly, and the Voodoo 5 does really well, and then we've got the Rage 128 and 128 Pro, so you can see just how far behind they are in this game. The Rage 6 does a lot better. Look at that, at the high resolution it's even faster than the TNT 2 Pro, a little bit behind the Voodoo, but not much. That's definitely a good result and indicates that the Rage 6 is actually a capable card for direct 3D games, at least on the Super Socket 7 platform, and the Radeon 9200 still a little bit behind. Okay, now we're looking at anti-aliasing performance. The game is GLQuake at 800 by 600 in 32-bit colors. Here we've got no anti-aliasing, 2x and 4x, and the green card is the original Radeon, and the blue card is the 9200. And just like with NVIDIA, we can see that the early cards lose a lot of performance, but the later cards, the 9200 in this case, loses a lot less. So if you want to use high levels of AA, you want to go with something newer like the Radeon 9200. Anti-aliasing in incoming, same resolution, 800 by 600 and 32-bit colors. Same thing applies, although all the cards can do really well with 2x anti-aliasing. It's just once you switch to 4x, the Radeon loses quite a bit of performance. Okay, time to look at TNL performance. We're testing the game MDK2, which is an OpenGL game, at 640 by 480 and 32-bit colors. And quite something interesting emerges here. The graphics card actually performs slower when you enable TNL. So I believe this was the first ATI card with the TNL on the chip, and at least on the Super Socket 7 platform, you don't want to turn it on. You're actually losing a bit of performance. Different story in 3D Mark 2000. Here we can see a clear boost in performance. Now, 3D Mark has 3 options to do the TNL. You can do it on the processor, you can do it with 3D Now optimization, and you can do it on the GPU, and we can see a nice boost. 3D Mark 2000 takes advantage of TNL quite a bit, so it's a good benchmark to compare TNL performance. Let's have a look at the Radeon 9200. Very similar to the other game in terms of how much raw performance it gets. We can see a 1 FPS boost by enabling TNL. So maybe that's an issue to do with the OpenGL drivers, I'm not sure. Okay, 3D Mark 2000, the same conclusion applies. You can clearly see the TNL working. It basically, compared to the software TNL, it doubles the performance. So the TNL is definitely working in both cards. It just, the game I picked just happens to either not be very well optimized for the ATI TNL, or the ATI just doesn't work well with the OpenGL games. Okay, time to look at DOS. Lots of graphics card results. They're all doing really well. Let's have a look at PC Player Benchmark in 320 by 200. No issue there. They're all basically the same. At 640 by 480, let's see if there's anything interesting. No, they're also doing very well. In Doom, let's have a look if there's anything interesting. Yep, we can now see that the ATI cards are losing a little bit of performance, but really it's not much. So this is the Rage 128. This is the Rage 128, 128 Pro. Then we've got the Radeon, and then the Radeon 9200. So in Doom, they're losing a bit of performance, but who cares? The game is FPS capped at 35 frames per second, so it's not a big deal at all. And in Quake, let's see if there are any differences here. Nope. That card is actually the fastest one, the Radeon 9200 with 88 frames. So there you have it. If you benchmark in Quake, you might want to check out the 9200. Oh, there's another one. The Rage 128 also did really well. So maybe that's a hint that for Quake benchmarking, you might want to go with an ATI card. Time for some analysis. So we've had a look at the benchmarks, and it is a bit of a mixed bag. I had high hopes for ATI. It's a bit of an underdog video card choice. Most people go for 3DFX or NVIDIA, but it was definitely important to test the ATI cards. The main thing to take away from all of this is that it appears that ATI didn't spend too much time optimizing the drivers for the K6 platform. That was a big deal back in the day when you looked at reviews. There was the Pentium 3 on one side, and there were a couple of people still using the SuperSocket 7 platform as an alternative. And the K6 has a very weak floating point unit, so you needed to use the 3D Now optimization. Now, this card, the Rage 128 Pro, I've benchmarked recently on a much faster machine, and it did really well. It was right up there with the TNT2, especially in 32-bit colors. But on the Socket 7 platform, this card struggles to get going. Same with the Rage 128. But do note, it's not all about the performance. I freely admit, and that's something I discovered while I was doing these videos, is that the benchmarks I'm using are quite modern games and probably not representative of what most people will run on a SuperSocket 7 platform. You'll likely run some older games, and here the ATI cards will likely offer enough performance. In terms of compatibility, I have to admit I have not tested enough. I mostly use 3DFX and NVIDIA cards, so I've got a good idea of what games work and if there are any issues. With the Radeon cards, I simply haven't used them enough. So that's something you might have to try out and see for yourselves. But what is good? There's lots of good stuff to talk about. 32-bit color support and really good drivers. I only had to use 2 drivers for all cards. The Rage cards used 1 driver, and all the Radeon cards also used another driver. They have VSync controls built in. You can set the anti-aliasing, you can set the texture filtering. So the drivers are actually really nice, and the games I tried, I actually didn't run into any compatibility issues. TNL performance is a mixed bag as well in the Direct 3D benchmark, and I really only tried the FutureMark 3D Mark 2000. You could see a clear benefit of TNL kicking in, but in the only game I tested, which is an OpenGL game, and OpenGL seems to always be a little bit of a weakness for ATI. In the OpenGL game, I really could not see a benefit. To make matters worse, the Radeon SDI actually performance dropped a tiny little bit with transformation and lighting. And the 9200, even that card, we could not really see any difference. When it comes to eye candy, turning on anti-aliasing and texture filtering, the conclusion is similar to NVIDIA and 3DFX. The newer the card, the better performance you're gonna get. DOS performance is fine. So far, all the graphics cards perform pretty well under DOS. In terms of compatibility, and I'm gonna refer to a compatibility chart that someone out there created. He tested a bunch of games and made a compatibility matrix. You can see that the ATI cards do have some issues to do with smooth scrolling and so on. So for DOS gaming, you're better off with a 3DFX card or a card from NVIDIA. So you've seen the benchmarks, and I've had a little bit of a chat about all these cards. So the bottom line is that these cards are not bad, but there are better options. You are better off getting a 3DFX or an NVIDIA card for the SuperSocket 7 platform. So remember, this is a video series to do with finding the best graphics card for the SuperSocket 7 platform. It's very likely that these graphics cards, the story is totally different on a Pentium 3 or Pentium 4. And that's it for this video, guys. Going forward, I will definitely do a few more SuperSocket 7 videos, but then I want to move on to something else. Quite interesting, but there's only so much one can take about one topic, and you gotta find another project to do. So thanks for watching, and see you soon.